Bit of wash-up from Australian domestic cricket. Jason Gillespie is leaving South Australia and the Adelaide Strikers as the coach there. They won a final under him in 2017-18, the only title they've had in recent times. He's been coaching the Strikers. He was doing that split duties role for a while as well since 2015, and then he took over the state, the first class and 50 over teams since 2020/21. They were fifth in the Shield last year. They sort of nearly made the final the year before that, season, not year, but had a bad season in the one just gone. So Tim Nielsen, who's the sort of cricket boss, has stepped down from there as well. Changes afoot in South Australia and changes in the branding stuff as well. The very 90s branding of, the teams had to have a mascot or something that would make it easier to sell. The Victorian Bushrangers, and the South Australia were the Redbacks, and the women's team were the Scorpions. They've got rid of both of those now, so they're just going back to playing under the old SACA sort of name, and they're using a big squirrely SACA logo, which is what they'll be using for branding from now on.
Yeah, Victoria did that 2 years ago. They moved away from the Bushrangers. There's probably a long read on the different nicknames that Australian domestic teams have used at different points. So what was it, the drink driving, think again, Blues, and there was something similar to that in WA, but I mean, obviously the Blues and the Warriors were the other names, but they were messing around in the margins there for a couple of years. But RIP the Redbacks and the Scorpions.
The Speed Blitz
Interesting that
Blues
the stuff.
or something like that.
There you go. That might have been alcohol think again.
The alcohol think again Warriors, which, you've got to say some of that Warriors team, they did think again, and then they had the same thought. They continued to have that thought many times. But
alcohol think again. Think of ways you can keep your skin folds down and find an alternative. But the Gillespie stuff's interesting, that it intersects with the Pakistan stuff, right? So, yeah, it's been a relatively long stint, been doing the Big Bash team for 9 seasons, in the first class stuff for 4 or 5, and they got close. They're a pretty good team. they've performed pretty well in the last 2 seasons at different points. They started this year so well, that close fourth innings chase, and it felt like they were on the build, having spent a number of years in the doldrums, having made a couple of Shield finals a decade ago. But yeah, this feels like the right time to transition, perhaps, but it doesn't hurt that Gillespie has a job on the table, seemingly, reportedly, with Pakistan. Look, when we interviewed Gillespie, when was it, Jeff? 2017-18 Ashes, he said that coaching an international team for him was something that he was keen on doing at some point. He hadn't just found the right suitor yet, right? Like, he nearly ended up coaching. I
think it was
England
timing as well, because his family, he had a young family at that point, and he wasn't quite. He was being talked of quite highly for the England job, and he just wasn't sure that he was ready to commit to taking off around the world for as much time as it would demand, and being away from home. So he had that. He got that sweet deal where he was able to do the Adelaide and Sussex gigs, and come back and forth between the two, but be sort of solidly 6 months in one place and then in the other, and so that was more stable for his family life.
Yeah, so just to skip through this, the quote from Gillespie in the SACA media release: "I'm looking forward and I'm excited to explore new opportunities in the sport and pursue the next chapter in my career." That hints towards this Pakistan job. That now, to go into this is predictably chaotic. They've gotten rid of Hafiz as director of cricket, who was doing the coaching job in Australia last summer. He's gone altogether.
Interim.
They're now reportedly going to appoint 3 national coaches. Why have one when you can have 3?
Sure.
2 of which are likely to be Gillespie for the red ball, Gary Kirsten for the white ball. How Kirsten's going to square that, given he's working as the Gujarat batting coach in the IPL, I don't think he'll be able to look after the Pakistan white ball team and Gujarat, which is almost certainly more lucrative anyway. Time will tell on that. We had Gary Kirsten on our show last year and talked about the success he enjoyed with India, including winning the 2011 World Cup. So going from India to Pakistan would be quite the thing, and he knows what pressure's all about, and that gig in Pakistan is loaded with pressure at all times. And look, this is in the same week. So all this speculation around the coaching job, and it feels like this is the 4th or 5th time we've spoken about it due to the Shane Watson rumours a few weeks ago. It's happened at the same time that Pakistan have officially made Babar Azam the white ball captain again. Now, remembering he was sacked as white ball captain, or he stood down. I'm not sure if it was on his own volition or otherwise after the misadventure for them at the World Cup last year. So Shaheen Sharafridi took over as the T20 captain for all of one series. And now Shaheen, who was quoted in the media release sort of saying, oh, I'm loyal to Barber, all the platitudes and so on, he's cracked the shits and said that he said nothing of the sort. He's not challenging the sentiment, but he was never consulted for comment. They've put quotes from him in the release about Barber Azam becoming the new captain, and he's blown up at the chairman, Moshin Naqvi, and this is all in the reporting from Daniel Rasool, who was a guest on our show recently from ESPN Crick Info. So totally chaotic. I get the impression just between the lines here that this new chairman, Moshin Naqvi, is a total ideas man, and I sense that there'll be more drama coming up in Pakistan, which may or may not involve Jason Gillespie taking on that most challenging job. But I don't know, Jeff, he strikes me as the kind of guy who, like, he's so positive and practical and upbeat about the game itself and about coaching that I reckon he'd take the chaos in his stride. I feel like he'd be temperamentally pretty well suited to something like that.
Maybe. I mean, it just... I don't know. It's like we were talking about with Shane Watson being in the running for it. You know, if you're up for a coaching job in Pakistan, there is every chance that it lasts for 6 months and then you get the chop. You know, there's so, like, in a way, there's almost no point because you're letting yourself in for damage potentially. You know, you're like maybe you're going to earn some decent coin for that 6 months or so, and nobody's going to hold it against you because getting sacked as a Pakistan coach is just something that happens to probably most people at some point in their careers, right? But I don't know. Like, I wonder what the benefit is. Like, it's hard to see someone like Gillespie being able to succeed there, where he's the kind of person who wants to take some time, wants to get to know everybody, wants to settle in and build a relaxed team environment and that kind of thing, which is so difficult to do, if not impossible to do, in a situation where the players are having the rug pulled out from under their feet all the time, where nobody's confident about their place in the team most of the time, where there's the politics and vested interests and vendettas and all the rest of it as such a big part of it. So, yeah, he might be able to sort of be calm in the face of that, but I don't think that means that his style would be effective or would be allowed to be effective in that kind of environment.
Yeah, possibly. I guess it's one of these high risk, high reward decisions you get the chance to make in life occasionally, where it might go horribly wrong, but if you end up being a successful coach of Pakistan, like for a time Mickey Arthur was, you get the chance to go back time and time again. So, look, if he does get that gig, I'd love to have him on and to talk about it. We'll see whether that's possible. We've had him on the show a couple of times in the past. He's always been good to us, so we'll see. Moving away from Pakistan and back to Australia, just a few bits and bobs here around the domestic awards that were handed out over the weekend in Cricket Victoria land. Fergus O'Neill won both the Bill Lawry and the Dean Jones medals, so that's white ball cricket and red ball cricket. He was the Bradman Player of the Year. Just wanted to say there's a terrific profile of Fergus O'Neill written by Louis Cameron on cricket.com.au that came out last month. He refers to himself, or he was referred to by coach Adam Dale, as a Commodore as opposed to a Ferrari, in that you've got to perform every single day when you're not razzle-dazzle, and when you bowl at his pace, I suppose that all stands to reason. But he's quirky as well. He signs with the spray paint when they mark their run-ups each morning. He signs it ASAP with the $ for the S to reflect the rapper ASAP Ferg. He's got had that rat tail haircut for a while there. He's obsessed with Billy Brownless. So there's all these different from his time when he was a tradie and he would listen to Billy Brownless and James Brayshaw on Triple M, and he's the kind of guy who I hope makes it, because he'd be fun to cover his international career, but he's given himself every chance, having done so well for Victoria since getting his first opportunity a couple of years ago. On the women's side of the ledger, Nicole Fulton's won the Sharon Treadray medal for another super consistent season in the WNCL as the wicketkeeper batter. Only 24-25, so there could be the chance for her to have an international career in the future, certainly giving herself an opportunity for that. In other women's gongs, I saw Nicola Carey won the Tassie Award. Amanda Jade Wellington, our fave, won the award in South Australia, and we might try and do a roundup of a few of the other awards around the country next week, as they have those ceremonies, as they tend to do at this time of year. And And one other piece of news from Australia from an administrative perspective is that Steph Beltram has left Cricket Australia. There was a release this week. She was the longest serving staff member at Cricket Australia, having been the boss of broadcast and broadcast rights for years and had that wider executive responsibility across the commercial brief as well. So, I mean, I don't know Steph that well. I have met her a number of times, but what I do know is that she's very highly thought of in those circles and has done a lot of good in this rapidly changing commercial broadcast environment and been a bit of a cricket lifer. So interested to see what she goes on to do next.
Well, she was also a fix-it kind of person when, in a range of things across broadcast and rights and media and so on. And then when Benamafio got booted out of the job peremptorily, she was the one who had to pick up the pieces there and kind of come in and, from memory, had to take that over first as an interim job. And then there was restructuring that she ended up effectively doing a chunk of taking a lot of that portfolio on. You can find more about it in my book, Steve Smith's Men, which details the incredibly turbulent time in Australian cricket administration, which I can't remember all the details of, but I definitely researched it for that chapter. Contracts, we told you that we'd talk about contracts, and we will. We are true to our words. Let's run through a couple of the things that are going on here. So, The players who you would expect to be getting them are getting them, but there've been a couple of changes. So Matt Short, Aaron Hardy, Nathan Ellis, and Xavier Bartlett are the 4 new contract holders. David Warner doesn't have one anymore, obviously, because he's retired or about to, will have retired fully after the T20 World Cup in June. Marcus Stoinis is off the list. Marcus Harris, Michael Neser, Ashton Agar. Now, that doesn't mean that those last 4 are out of the running completely, because you can still get incremental contracts, and you don't actually need to play that much to get an incremental contract if you play 6 white ball games for Australia. So basically, if someone gets picked through the World Cup, if Stoinis were in the T20 World Cup 11 and played 6 games, then he'd get an incremental contract from that. But yeah, chances that happening might be diminishing, I suppose.
Just think it's an interesting thing that we're heading into a T20 World Cup and Stoinis has been left off. Like, you would have thought this is the time where he would be very much a contracted player, but it might suggest that they are looking to move away from him. And look, he's older than he gives the impression of. He made his international debut when he was 29. So Marcus Harris, God, I still feel like he's so stiff when you sort of zoom out a little bit. You go back to where he was at as an incumbent within that Australian Test team in 21-22. That test match at Melbourne and so on, and has only played once more after that, been the spare batter a number of times. Michael Neser, speaking of stiff, and Christ, I was watching him bowl in the nets as recently as 4 or 5 weeks ago, not even 2 or 3 weeks ago in Christchurch, and he's still such a classy cricketer, and his record's only getting better, but found himself on the other side of it, owing to the fact that they want to bring through Bartlett, which isn't unreasonable, Bartlett having started his career so well in one-day cricket. Nathan Ellis, who's such a handful in short form stuff and will certainly be part of that T20 squad. And then Ashton Agar, who, I mean, who knows where he sits now. It feels like he's been overtaken in the T20 side for the time being. He was within that world for a long time. We'll always think about Ashton Agar and that test debut, but that's 11 years ago now. He's he I suppose he must be 30, Jeff, because he made his debut when he was 19, didn't he? So he's either 30 or turning 30 in 2024. And yeah, I mean, there's still time for him, of course, but if he doesn't make it back, and we know what happened with him in India last year, that'd be a sad thing, because we've sort of been on this journey. All of us have been on this journey with Agar, waiting for the moment where he might go on to be a bit of a world beater, and he's definitely had his moments in the coloured clothing for Australia, part of successful World Cup squad in 2021 in the UAE, although he didn't play in the final, I don't think. But never quite reaching the heights that we all would have expected when he was a prodigy as a late teen.
It's interesting. I suppose you can look at it at face value and say it's unfair for Neser, but you look at who they've got in. So you've got your main test quicks of Cummins, Hazelwood, Stark, of course. You've got the players who would be seen as reserves. Scott Boland's got a contract and Neser didn't. It's probably one or the other, given their relative ages and so on, because Lance Morris has one who's seen as kind of the next thing, and Jai Richardson they're still hoping will come good. So he's got a contract. That's the only other spot where Neser might have kept one is if Richardson hadn't got one. And I think they're looking at Richardson and saying, well, he's younger, he's got the potential to come good at some point if he can sort out his injury problems and be that weapon that he sort of promised to be 5 years ago. Exactly, just have the patience with him. And although he's older than Cummins was at a relatively similar stage of their careers, they've got some limited over sort of faster bowling specialists with Sean Abbott, Nathan Ellis and Xavier Bartlett. They've got the spinners with Lyon for the red ball stuff, Zampa for the white ball, and Todd Murphy as the Lyon backup, all-rounders in Green, Marsh, Maxwell, Hardy and Short. And yeah, that's probably a tell for the Stoinis thing as well, that maybe they're looking more at Matt Short for the middle order. Although, Matthew Wade's a chance to play in that T20 World Cup and he doesn't have a contract. Carey and Inglis are the wicket keepers and the sort of specialist bats for the test side, Khawaja, Smith, Labuschagne, Head. So broadly it makes sense. And I guess if any of the players who you feel are unlucky to miss out actually get picked, they need 12 points to get an incremental contract. So that's 2.5 test matches or 6 white ball games. They'll get a contract based on being picked. So I don't think it necessarily rules out those fringe case players, but they're, the truth of the matter is Neser hasn't played these last few years. He's made picked up a couple of tests as an injury substitute. He hasn't been the preferred option when they've wanted backup. Recently, that's been Boland, and that's about the end of it. Yeah,
there's just always been someone prettier than him, right? They look at him and they probably, again, one of those Commodores rather than the Ferrari, and there's always a sort of the equivalent of the latter floating around in domestic cricket who's taller and quicker or whatever it is. Just quickly on the South African men contract situation. So this is all reporting from Neil Manthorpe in his excellent newsletter. Nothing for Anrich Nortje, but as Matters says, It's not a snub as such. Even though he's 30, he's had that long layoff with injury, and he makes 10 times as much money with Delhi as he makes from South Africa, and understandably wants to protect his body. So, there is a reason why Nortje doesn't want it. David Bettingham, for different but similar reasons, like Durham are his main employer. Durham is his meal ticket. And Bettingham got his opportunity, and that's terrific, and he's made a Test 100, and hopefully he goes on to enjoy something of an international career, and that should continue in August when they play Test matches against the West Indies when the 100's on. He hasn't got a 100 contract, well, not yet at least. So that should work out okay for him, but still it's an example of where national contracts aren't what they used to be. And Rabada's got one, of course, but we know that isn't really worth the paper it's written on when it comes to Rabada being more available, shall we say, to playing in India, as we saw when he skipped the Test series last year. So, again, this is just another example of the way world cricket is changing. And with South Africa, it's more acute than it is for Australia at the moment, because their contracts are simply worth less money.
Yep, and it makes sense really. If you're cricket South Africa, you've got Rabada who's willing to take a contract and willing to be available at least a fair bit of the time for you. Why antagonise one of your best players? If he, you can't get in the way of that player fulfilling IPL duties and getting paid way more than you can afford to play them. Otherwise, you'll lose them permanently. The Bangladesh-Australia Women's Series has been going on in a very one-sided way. We talked about the first ODI where Bangladesh actually bowled and fielded really well, sort of had Australia in some trouble for a while, but their batting was absolute dross in the reply, and it has continued to be so. The second ODI, they were all out for 95. The third ODI, they were all out for 89. It's been a battering. Plenty of Australians picking up cheap wickets. Kim Garth, Elise Perry, Sophie Molyneux, Ash Gardner, all hoovering up plenty of them. They played a T20 in Dhaka where Bangladesh made 126 for 4, which was a better showing, better than they'd managed in any of the 50-over games. Jyoti, the captain, whose work we've enjoyed, 62 not out from 63 balls, which was solid, and Fahima Khatun made 27 off 21. So that was a better showing. Molyneux was 2 for 25 there. And Taylor Velamick back, the speedster, with 1 for 30, so that's encouraging. Yes. She's had so many stress fractures in her foot. They've just finished playing the second T20 as well, Adam, as we've been talking. So Australia made 161 for 8. Bangladesh ended up 9 down for 103. So again, just really struggling with the bat. But yeah, it's been very one-sided in that particular department. 3 wickets for Gardner today, 3 more for Molyneux, 3 for 10 that she picked up there. So yeah, Australia have won both those white ball series. There's one T20 to go.
And they chased down that 126 in just 13 overs in the first one day, with Healy 65 not out from 42 and Mooney 55 not out from 36. I mean, there's surely no better opening partnership that Australia's women have enjoyed in white ball cricket, right? I mean, there wouldn't be heaps of competition for that, owing to the fact that, say, in the T20 stuff, it's only been going for 15 years or whatever. But Healy and Mooney together are an extraordinary force. Their numbers bear that out. And yes, we've got 2 more matches in the short form stuff to come. Sorry, 1 more, isn't it? Because today's makes it 2-0 and then they play a third. So good preparation for Australia's women ahead of that T20 World Cup in Bangladesh later in the year. There's been a lot of that going on with England's women in New Zealand as well. Where we left this last week was in the T20 series at 3-1. England had already wrapped it up. There was 1 more to play before the one-dayers. And the 5th T20, which was also at Basin Reserve, New Zealand, only got to 136 for 6. Although, good news that Izzy Gaze, who's been brought in as the 19-year-old wicketkeeper, she's got something about her. And she made 51 not out from 28 balls, so her best game for New Zealand yet. She saved them when they were at one stage 69 for 5 and about to fall off a cliff. But the other positive thing I think here, Jeff, is that Mealy Kerr was given the captaincy when Devine was missing with a quad injury. They didn't just give it back to Susie Bates, which probably would have been the easy thing to do. Instead, they went to Mealy Kerr, and that's a nod to the future. Nevertheless, England won that game, 5 down with 7 balls to spare, all pretty straightforward with the usual suspects chipping in. And Heather Knight top scoring with 35 to complete an excellent T20 series for her. Then in the first one, Daya, I was up for this one. I was doing the Guardian coverage till the wee hours of the morning on Sunday night. Kerr was in charge again for New Zealand with that's the first time she's led the White Ferns in a one-day international. It nearly was a great game. Didn't deserve to be. New Zealand's batting's just so bad. They were none for 30 off 10. Bates was having a crack, but it kind of masked the wider problems. And yeah, granted, Kate Cross was bowling beautifully. Interesting, it was Kate Cross's first game for England since September last year, because there's been so much T20 stuff for them. But back into the 50-over team and bowled the house down with the new ball. Yes, they didn't make the most of early opportunities. They dropped Bates a couple of times early on, I think. But once she was out for an even 50 from Charlie Dean, I should add, became the quickest ever to 50 one-day wickets in just 26 matches, which was a record that went back to 1987. So love watching Charlie Dean bowl. There was the Eccleston squeeze, as always, and the whole New Zealand innings was summed up really. And I hate to pick out one player, but I mean, Maddie Green, 7 from 23, then a limp caught and bowled from Lauren Bell. And, you know, along with Brooke Halliday and Maddie Green, they continue to get sustained opportunities, but it's hard to see how this New Zealand team can move on with the 2 of them in the middle order. Back to Cross, 10 overs, 3 maidens, 2 for 24 after 7 plays and misses in her first spell. She was immaculate. My fear is that New Zealand's batting can no longer realistically compete with Australia and England. I think the gap has just grown to such an extent that everything needs to go right for New Zealand. This is not the side that would beat Australia and be their toughest contest in those annual one-day series they would play. I think and it's probably the case with India too, but especially with Australia and England, who play so much against New Zealand, the gap's growing. So their bowling's, still broadly fine, I reckon. So take Mealy Kerr. She got busy early and took a few wickets in defending 206. They gave themselves a real chance with England, 58 for 5 and then 79 for 6 when Danny White was bowled by Kerr. So it's game on, but, predictably, England have got the depth. Amy Jones walks in at number 7, where she's batting these days, joined by Charlie Dean, who's very good for a number 8. And they put on an unbeaten 130 to win the match by 4 wickets in the 42nd over. So a terrific partnership where Jones has made 92 not out from 83, Charlie Dean 42 not out, the anchor down the other end, and probably timely for Amy Jones, thinking about where she fits and her World Cup spot. Maybe that's where she'll be at number 7 when they play that next 50-over World Cup in India. I think that's 18 months from now, Jeff. So 2 tournaments in quick succession for the women, the T20s in Bangladesh later this year, and then off to India in the September-October 2025. So, it feels just on what I've seen that New Zealand, as it's been in global tournaments over the last few years, won't be a serious threat there.
Yeah, I almost see it the other way with the Millie Kerr situation. Rather than being encouraging, it's more like they have nobody else to go to, and so much has been asked of her because she's the one genuine top quality player who's emerged from the next generation. You've had Bates and Devine carrying this team, with Satterthwaite and Tahuhu when they were more actively involved. But the fact that nobody else has come through who's actually quality enough for them to pass the captaincy onto, it has to be her, because there are other players who get picked all the time, but there's nobody who consistently deserves to get picked all the time, aside from Kerr. And she's got so much on her shoulders. She's a relatively quiet, sort of withdrawn sort of character, it seems, on the field. She's not hugely demonstrative. She doesn't seem to speak all that much out on the field. I'm not sure if, I haven't spent enough time around it to say with authority, but my impression is that captaincy isn't necessarily going to be the thing that she would rather be doing, rather than having somebody else run the game and let her. She's got to make most of the runs and take most of the wickets at the moment. She's had to become a quality batter because they haven't had anybody else after coming through as a phenom bowler as a teenager. So it just feels like they're asking too much of her.
I just think about when the WBBL started, it was the New Zealand imports who were the most dangerous players, and you could list about 6 of them, right? And now, if you were drawing up a depth chart of the most talented and most capable players in world cricket, I mean, sure, Devine would still be on there, absolutely. Suzie Bates at 36 still clearly making a contribution with the bat and indeed the ball as well. The one game New Zealand won in this series was with Bates bowling the last over and getting them out of jail. And Millie Kerr, most definitely. But after that, Leah Tahuhu, her best days are probably behind her, just on the basis that as a fast bowler, they tend to be diminishing returns. I mean, I like Hannah Rose. She played a role again, executed a run out when the game was there to be won, and love the way she swings the ball around. There'll be others as well. There'll be green shoots in domestic cricket. There always is, but it's just like, are they going to be anywhere near developed enough to compete at a World Cup from where they were? Remember, they won the World Cup in 2000. It's not as though we're talking about a side that's emerging from nowhere like a Pakistan or indeed a South Africa who have had a slower start and built to something. This was one of the big three, along with England and Australia. New Zealand were the other big team in women's global cricket, and yeah, it'd be disingenuous to say they are now.
The second test between Bangladesh and Sri Lanka at Chattogram. Lisa needs braces. Sri Lanka made 531 in that test match, and that pretty much covers the game for the most part. 96 for the first wicket, 210 for the second wicket, and on it went. One of the highest first-class innings without a century being scored, which is an Andrew Sampson special area that you like to communicate with the great statistician about, Adam.
Yeah, he was pumped about this. It is the highest test score ever without a ton. So you go through it, and Mudushka 57, Karuna Ratner 86, Krishal Mendez 93, Ange Matthews 23, Chandimal 59, Dhananjaya, the captain, 70. Kamindu Mendez stranded on 92. It would have been 3 tons on the trot for him after making twin centuries in the first test of the series. Jayasuriya 28. Vishwa Fernando down at number 9 making 11. So, 9 of the 11 batters have made it into double figures. And Daniel Norcross was quick to note to Samo that, it wasn't actually to Sampson, it was the wider association tweeting this out, but I know that Sampson's the man who keeps tabs on these things. That Surrey did have a higher score in the mid 600s a couple of years ago against Kent, where no one made a ton. But this is a new test record for what it's worth, and from there they are able to just take advantage of the psychological edge they're enjoying against Bangladesh. They bowled them out for 178, 4 wickets for Asitha Fernando, and the rest was shared. The highest score there was for Zakir Hassan, who came into the team and made 54. Second time around, Sri Lanka, well, they were under the pump for about 10 minutes, right? They lost early wickets, and there's a nice clip doing the rounds on social media where a ball spills out to third man, and there are 4 Bangladesh fielders herring after it together to demonstrate their desperation to try and drag themselves back into the game. But Sri Lanka only needed to make it to 157 for 7 before they declared. Angelo Matthews making 56 and top scoring, which set Bangladesh a most unlikely, shall we say, 511 to square the series. And as I talk, they are 162 for 4. So the probability of them hauling down 348 further runs is low, although with Shakib Al Hassan there, I suppose they'll have some vague hope. Lytton Das is batting with him. They're 22 and 23 respectively. Final session on day 4. So just thinking through this from a Sri Lankan perspective, Jeff, they're at the very start of the World Test Championship cycle, like where England and Australia have played so much Test cricket already in this World Chess Championship. This is the other side of it for them. So they lost their first series to Pakistan 2-0, but they'll win this away from home 2-0, right? And then they have a run of England away, which will be tough, but, England will be a side that's looking to do some interesting things this summer and trying to revamp their bowling. So, they'll come here with some hope. Then they play South Africa away, which who knows what sort of side South Africa will be rolling out. We talked earlier about the challenges for them. So again, that they're not at their best, put it that way. They get Australia at home to finish. And, they did beat Australia in the most recent test those nations played in Sri Lanka in 2022. So if they can get them in the right conditions, they might pull off something special. So I guess I'm just laying an early marker that I wouldn't count out Sri Lanka as making a late charge for the World Test Championship final, and they've given themselves the chance for that with what will probably be a 2-0 series win at Chattogram.
Angelo Matthews with the mace doing a tour of, well, it won't be Lords, there'll be some other random ground in England because it keeps not being Lords. But, mace time for Matthews.
Just one more thing, Jeff, before we move to the IPL, which I forgot to mention in the previous segment. Papua New Guinea beat Zimbabwe in a super over in their first ever win over a full member in women's cricket over the weekend. Just a nod to PNG for the work they've done behind the scenes to develop their women's side and to pay a number of them semi-professionally. And I guess there's proof there, right? There's proof there's a way through if you're an emerging nation. We talk a lot about Brazil, but it's not just a Brazil story. There are a lot of countries around the world who are trying to make this leap to the next level. And I know Zimbabwe are a side in progress as well. They didn't play for a long time across the last 10 years, but beating a full member. So, well played PNG over the Easter weekend.